Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary.
Hey guys, hope you're having an awesome day, whether you just started it, in the middle of it, or ending it. It should all be awesome. Are you noticing what you're saying, what you're doing, your actions, the people around you, how truthful they are, what truthful they are? I don't know if that makes sense, but you get what I mean. All about the honesty. I really found what Ellie said really interesting. If you didn't get a chance yet to hear it, you might just want to go back. It's a good episode. Now, for today's episode, we have another couple. Yay! You know how excited that makes me. And what's really interesting about this couple, I should really say the man in this couple, is how he teaches men to become the complete man. Yes, you can grow your business massively and have personal fulfillment in life and have a great relationship with the people you love most. He actually recently wrote a book called The Complete Man, which I found really, really interesting. I know I'm not a man, but I found so much value in that book. It really covers all aspects of life. To get the audiobook with 75% off, go to completemanaudio.com, promo code victory75. Or just to find out more about what he does, go to purdeepsangha.com. All the links will be in the show notes with the promo code and everything there. Now let's get this rolling. Thank you so much, Purdeep and Ruby, for being here. I'm so excited to be speaking with you. You want to start by telling us how you guys met?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess I could start off. It was interesting. One of my best friend's brother-in-laws, or his brother-in-law, was actually introduced to Ruby sometime before we met, trying to get them hooked up. And I guess it didn't work out. And then this gentleman basically said, well, I was introduced to this really nice girl. It didn't work out between us. It didn't really go anywhere. But I think you should be a really good fit for you. And she introduced us. And that's when I guess we went on our first date, which was really interesting because we're like polar opposites. And we both kind of walked out of there like, this isn't going to go anywhere. And then here we are 10 years later with two kids.
Wow. Now, how is your relationship now 10 years later than it was when you first met?
Well, I'll give my perspective, and then Ruby can give hers. Okay. It's been really interesting because we got together. We were younger. We were both 30 years old. So I think for me, I'll speak from my perspective. Our relationship at the beginning was very carefree because it was just Ruby and I, and we would just have fun and go out there and do the things that we enjoyed doing. It was a little bit of a change because we come from really different backgrounds. So I'm a farm boy. She's more of a city girl. So it took some adjusting there. And then we actually had our son fairly within the first 2 years?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And so that really changed the dynamics of our relationship, having our first child. And that really put, you could say, some responsibility on her shoulders. And then we had our second child a couple of years later.
A year and a half later.
Yeah. And then, Pilot, I'm pretty transparent. Our relationship at the beginning was very carefree. And then we went through this whole challenge of trying to understand each other even more, adding the pressures of kids, adding the pressure of other family members, and us changing as well. The person I am now, I'm relatively similar, but I think for me, I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot, evolved a lot from a relationship.
I would be scared if you're the same person you were 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think from that perspective, right now, I think we're in a stage where we're really getting into the groove, you can say, of understanding each other and being able to maybe not nitpick at each other's things or look at things. At the beginning, it was easy to kind of say, well, at the very beginning, it's like you see those things and you ignore them because you're totally in love, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I can put up with that. It's all good. But then after you get annoyed with each other, she'd be getting annoyed by the things I do and vice versa. But now we're kind of understanding each other more. And we're kind of saying, okay, you know what, this is some part of who the person is. It's not anything against a relationship or, he doesn't mean to say it this way or she doesn't mean to say it that way. So I'm excited because I think our relationship is just continuously growing. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, like you said, like in the beginning, it was more carefree, and I was still in school at that point. And now it's like over the years after we had kids, I guess it adds different responsibilities for sure. And also for me, it was like trying to manage, taking care of the kids, but then also having time for our relationship as well, which I find a lot of women often struggle with that, because the kids take up a lot of your time and energy, and half the time
Mhm.
you're so tired. It's like, okay, we have not a lot of energy left for each other.
Yeah. Do you feel it affects your relationship?
I feel like it definitely does. And I think it's important for both people to work on that. Like, having date nights, or having
Mhm.
that time carved away to spend time together. Cause otherwise it's easy to just be like, I'm too tired and we'll try again tomorrow kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I think, like you said, over the last 10 years, we've kind of learned each other's perspectives. I think just understanding each other better, and meeting each other's needs from
I,
that perspective.
yeah,
But
I think that's the biggest thing for us is really trying to meet each other's needs where we put a lot of other stuff on there in terms of responsibilities, whether it's finances or just meeting expectations of our extended family. But ultimately, if we can meet each other's needs, then we're happy, right? And I think that's where we've really come to is saying, okay, how do we meet each other's needs? Not the whole laundry list, but just a few core things that we need every single day to really make it a functional and a happy relationship. Because there were times where we were both like, is this the right relationship for us on both sides? And we went through some really tough challenges. But then we really understood, I think, that it really comes down to the energy that we put in, because it is tough when you have two kids. It is. It's a lot of energy. And I think from my perspective as a man, there's a lot of expectations that we put on to our wives, for example, not only as being, a lover, for example, but also a mother to the children. And it's tough because I don't think we fully understand what women go through when they have children. And so the level of fatigue, for example, right? I'm one of those driven guys. I push myself through, but it's because I grew up that way. I grew up on an orchard. So I was used to physical work, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and going out there working 16, 14 hours a day. So fatigue wasn't really something that was in my vocabulary. But for my wife, for example, it was a big part of her life. I think that really impacted her. And I think even now, which has helped significantly because you've helped, my wife has helped us, like even me, figure out, okay, what's the best thing to eat from a diet perspective? What's healthy to feed the kids? We are, I would say, fairly healthy as a couple. We eat good food, we exercise, we take our supplements, but my wife is in the medical field and she is also deep into functional medicine. So her desire to boost her energy, because we talked about how that impacted our relationship. I think that was one of the biggest things, and it took me a while to understand. Like I would just be like, "Come on, just get up and do it. Like just come on, just
Like,
push
why being
through."
so lazy?
Yeah, exactly. But then I finally realized I'm like, she just does not have any energy. And then when that clicked for me, I think it just, I had to pull back a little bit and say, okay, maybe a little bit less expectations, be a little bit more understanding, which gave her the room and the space to be able to do what she needed to do, I think, to take care of herself.
Was it disappointing for you? Like you always had this expectation of having so much energy, being able to accomplish so much. And all of a sudden, first, like you were in denial about it, and then you came to accept it. But was it like some grief going on there when you had that acceptance?
For me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's grief, because my biggest worry at that time was, is this going to be like forever? Right. And I think that's the biggest thing. You can say I have a lot of patience, in our relationship and with our children. So if I see progress, I think that's the biggest thing that I look for in everything in my life, whether it's this relationship or any other relationship or in business, it's really, are we progressing? Are we evolving? And so that if there was a point where I'm like, I don't know if I could do this forever. Like I probably couldn't, right? We had some really tough conversations, but I have seen like a total turnaround in terms of energy levels and our relationship and the effort that's being put in, and my understanding now. It's like, okay, I know better for next time. But yeah, it was a little bit challenging there for a bit, definitely.
Yeah. What do you say, Ruby? Once you felt understood, did it make you look at him differently?
Well, I think it was also because as women, I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes you expect the men to just get it, understand what we're thinking. And we're like, I feel like women are very complicated because we deal with a lot of different roles and emotions. And sometimes, like, I found with myself, I was like, I should just understand what I'm dealing with. And I think just I've learned over the years, just verbalizing it more and saying, look, this is exactly how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. Like, because I find with men often, I don't know if they often want to fix things, right? Like, they're, how can I fix this? Whereas women are like, can you just listen to me and just be there, just be present. You don't need to do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think just talking more and being more open about how we're feeling has helped a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I think just keeping that lines of communication open is important.
Yeah. Could you just move over, Ruby, a tiny bit?
Oh, sure.
There's like the mic right on your face. Thank you. Now, what would you tell a couple? I think that all relationships that last long go through that phase of that challenging, like figuring out, is this, maybe there's just so much challenges going on there. What would you tell a couple who's right now in that stage?
Well, I think I would tell them that any relationship, it takes work and it's worth it. If you just work together and talk about things openly and express, like I mentioned, like express your needs and express what you want from both sides, so that you have a better understanding of where the other person's coming from. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. I'll take a more practical approach because I do this for a living in terms of helping men, not necessarily from a relationship standpoint, but how to show up as the best version of yourself as a man or as a leader. Is I take a look at relationships just like a team. If you were to say whether it's sports team or business team, it's really, we're working together. We have these individual goals, we have these couple goals. And I think that's one of the big things to take a look at, is actually say, okay, what do we really want out of our relationship? And how do we both work together as a team? And I think if couples approach it as from a team perspective, I think it's a different angle, it's a different take, rather than saying, I want this or you want that. It says, it's basically, how do we make this happen together? And
it's not me against you. It's working it out.
And I think I see that a lot in a lot of couples. They're working against each other rather than with each other. When you really get down to it, in a lot of cases, you want very similar things. Maybe not exact same, and maybe they can be delivered slightly differently, but that's where you have those conversations and have those open things. But it's a process of evolution. And I think that's the biggest thing couples need to understand, is that you get stronger through the tough times, right? I know that sounds cliche, but if you can get through it, and if you can see the progress that you're making, so not just, I'm not saying just a progress as a couple, or a progress that I see in my wife, for example, but the progress I see in myself as a man, as a husband, because I'm constantly rethinking how I approach things. I'm constantly taking a look and saying, how do I be a better husband? How do I be a better man as a result of this? And so this has almost become fun, where there's a challenge in our relationship. And I know it sounds kind of quirky, but I say, okay, how can I become stronger as a man as a result of this? And
it's
how
like
do I
a game.
become better? Yeah, it becomes a game. It really does. And so if you treat it like a game, and you work together as a team, then you become a lot more effective. And it honestly is those moments, because it's not every single moment that you're aligned, but when those moments you are aligned, like today, for example, like she was very, very shy about coming on today's show. And I was very grateful. I was very thankful for her to do that. And she probably wouldn't, right? Every chat she got today, she's like, do I have to do this? Do I have to do this?
It's so happy you're here with us.
But for me, it means a lot, because this is a team effort, right? This means a lot to me, because I do this for a living. She doesn't. So I appreciate that. And I definitely, like I said before, I guess I owe you one, right?
No, this is fun. Happy to be here.
Thank you. It really means a lot. Now, your backgrounds, like you mentioned, were really different, and obviously in many ways added to your relationship, but for sure created a lot of challenges with your relationship. How did you deal with that?
Took a decade, but how did we deal with that? I know it's been a bit of I think we learned through the struggles, like just understanding each other's differences. Like it wasn't about changing the other person. It was just about accepting, okay, she's, a city girl and like this, and he's a farm boy, how he described himself, and he's into this, but appreciating, I think, what each other brought to each other's lives. Because I grew up in the city. I was never used to like living out in nature, which is, we have a lot more nature where we live now. And animals, like my husband loved animals. I didn't grow up with pets or anything, but just appreciating, I think, the simpler things in life and being grateful for every day, like things that I probably in a city life, I was just more go, go, go and not really taking a breath and just appreciating the simple things, which he's brought to my life, I would say. And I appreciate that. And I don't know for you.
Well,
Things
I,
have been
I would
different.
say it was tough at first. And maybe because of the way I was raised too, because I'm very like, okay, we got to fix this or we got to do this and just get to the root cause and try to change things to make it better. But I think it was a challenge for both sides because we were so different. But because I literally I could live in the country, and for Ruby, it's kind of like I want neighbors around. But here's the interesting thing is we have developments around now. And she's like, "Oh, it's getting busy here now. I liked it better when there's no
Yeah.
neighbors and stuff." So we're kind of seeing that now when we see the other person's perspective. And I think it really comes down to when you remove the resentment, because that is what kills a lot of relationships. And resentment is what I call it, the silent killer. And interesting enough, my wife works in oncology and with cancer patients. A lot of times these people have cancer and all of a sudden they don't know until the very last stages. That's how I see resentment. And for a while we operated with resentment, or I know I did, like
Yeah.
underlying. And that was the biggest thing, is to remove that resentment. Then all those little challenges, the differences that we see don't become so, I'm going to say, cancerous. They just become part of, hey, look, this is just who we are. And this is really interesting. Because I can tell you, like my wife, the one thing I appreciate about her is that she does like sometimes the fancier things. But that's what I appreciate about her, because that's what attracted to me to her in the first place. And I think when you go back to that, a lot of couples will see that those differences are what really attract you to the other person. And
Yeah.
if you can
So
remove
many
all the other
times.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So many times one partner will try to change the other one. The other partner will try to comply, but then afterwards there's no more attraction because
Yeah.
what they were attracted to was the differences.
Yeah, there was,
It's
there's a
true.
big time because I really sat down. And it was like a big aha moment for me. I'm like, I do not want her to be like me, because I couldn't, like, I'm very intense in certain areas. I'm like, like I said, get things done. I wouldn't be able to be married to her if she was like me. Let's put it that way.
So how has your business, I should say, affected your relationship?
My business?
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's always there's pros and cons. Let's just put it that way. My business is, one of the areas is, the coaching consulting side, which has really helped my relationship because I do a lot of introspective work. I work with a lot of men that have challenges in relationships or in life, and I see what they're going through, and it helps me be a better husband as well. So from that perspective, it's great. On the other side, sometimes, what I can tend to be too involved in business. Right. My wife jokes and she's like, well, you're on your phone. I'm like, yeah, I'm still working hours. And my work to me is very similar to, I guess, my wife's work to her, where she's dealing with dying patients. And I'm dealing with men, for example, on a different level where I'm helping them in different areas of level.
Dying emotionally.
Yeah, dying emotionally. In all respects, that's what it is. My son was actually, I laugh at it. He's like, Dada, you don't work at all. Mama's the one that deals with patients and, the sick people. He's like, you just sit in front of your computer and talk to people and stuff like that. And it took me a while to explain to him, and I don't think he still gets it, that I do a different kind of work. But work is, I'm very cognizant trying to keep that balance. And it is tough because in the work that I do, and even you, like, you're responsible to other people, right? You're there to help other people. When you do that, you kind of get sucked into it a lot because you feel like there's a responsibility. But I'm able to kind of shut that off when I need to at times, and I think
Mhm.
you're getting better at that
I'm
too.
working on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, men have an easier time with that.
Yeah.
Do you feel, Ruby, that you bring your work, like the emotions of that, into your relationship and your home life?
Yes, I do a lot. And that's been one of the challenges, I think, with us over the last few years, is because I work with leukemia patients. And oftentimes, like I feel like caring for these people over like months on end, sometimes years, you develop a relationship with them. And I feel like they're more than just patients, right? It's like you really develop that bond with them and they appreciate the care so much that I find that I am always thinking about them. And like even at home, it has brought an appreciation for me, like to be appreciating and be more grateful for every day, grateful for everybody's health. Like I think that's what part of what you mentioned earlier was my increased focus on being healthy and having that energy to be there for my kids and for Pradeep. I think that has fueled that a little bit, but I think I'm working on letting go of that and having like trying to leave work at work and not constantly worrying or thinking about patients or if we lose patients, letting that affect our home life. But it's a work in progress for sure.
Like everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how she does it. In all honesty, what she's able to do with her patients is, it's a gift from God. Basically, it's being able to sit there and deal with dying people and bring a smile to their face, because that's what she brings a smile to our family, and I know she does that with her patients. But I couldn't imagine doing it myself. Like medicine was one of the things that I originally was going to get into, but I couldn't see people struggle like that. So I hopped out real quick. And so it requires a very special person to be able to do that kind of stuff.
That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Now I know Purdeep, you speak quite a bit about the masculine and feminine energy. You want to tell us a bit about that and how first about it, and then how you've been able to apply it to your own marriage.
Yeah, sure. So it's if we get into the spiritual side of that, basically, and that's originally where it stems from. In a lot of Eastern cultures, that's where it originated from. You have the yin and yang, for example, in India, it's Loni and Yinga, and so what that represents is two opposite opposing energies in the universe, and when you bring them together, it creates one. And it just so happens that the way it's translated into the Western world, I can just simply break it down, is that the masculine energy, where the majority of energy that men have is masculine. Let's just say heterosexual men. And the majority of energy that women have, heterosexual women, is feminine energy. And we have to understand that both energies are like the two ends of a magnet, for example. And the reason why magnets attract the North and South Pole is because of the opposite. And so that's the same in a relationship dynamic as well. And we as individuals have those energies within us. And I don't like to say opposing energies. They're the opposite, because they're not really opposing each other, because they do attract each other, but they are different. They are dramatically different. The masculine energy is very firm. It's very direct. It's very task focused. It's very goal driven. It's very peaceful as well. Very solid. It can also be very boring, right? Because it's very still, whereas the feminine is more flowing. It's more creative. It's about embracing and absorbing, whereas the masculine energy is more about releasing and letting go. And so these energies impact relationships, and they impact how men show up. So how I show up as a man, for example, I have to be conscious and say, what energy am I acting in right now? Am I feeling right? Because if you show up, let's just say as a man in a relationship or any other aspect, and you're showing up with your masculine energy, well, the environment around you will respond accordingly. So if I'm very task driven in my approach, then the environment will respond accordingly. And that can work for you, for example, in business, if you need to be driven, if you need to get something done. But let's just say you're sitting there with your employees that are having a tough time with a specific project or a task. I may need to flex more of my feminine energy, which is more about connecting with them, because I want to maybe inspire them more. And this really impacts relationships, because most people don't understand how this works. The dynamic between our relationship, for example, is I got with my wife, or I was attracted to her because of her feminine energy. That's what attracted me, because most of my time I'm driven in the masculine. And so there was a point in time in our relationship, and I talk about this in the book, where I dropped it, because even knowing what I know and the stuff that I teach, there's this voice inside of us that says, am I still doing the right thing? Am I still behaving the right way? And men are getting a lot of confusing signals today in terms of what it means to be masculine. And so I always double check and say, okay, am I being too masculine? And then when I would do that, I would drop into my feminine state and be, I would say, less confident in my masculine. And then she would bump up her masculine. And it just threw the energy in our relationship off. And there was less attraction. That's ultimately what ends up happening. This is what a lot of society is pushing these days, is men to be less masculine and women to be even more masculine, which is throwing things off. And from a relationship standpoint, I know one of my colleagues, that's what he focuses on, is relationships. And he says that the biggest challenge that his clients have are basically women in their 30s that are saying they can't find masculine men. They're either taken or they're just not around. They're just either too feminine, they can't take on the responsibility, they're not man enough, whatever that looks like. But it's an important thing because this is a fundamental attraction between relationships, between two people. If that attraction is not there between the feminine and the masculine energy, then that relationship will eventually fall apart.
Yeah.
It will dwindle. You won't have the passion. And I'm not just talking about sexual, I'm just talking about intellectual as well. I'm talking about you'll feel yourself drift apart.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, how, like, did you know about this the whole time? Like, I was always into this from like a young age, and it's been interesting to see how these come about. But have you known this like when you were married? Did it develop later on? How did you bring it into your marriage?
Is that a question for me or for Ruby?
For both of you.
Well, I'll start and then you can jump in, I guess.
You're the expert.
Yeah, I was in a long-term relationship in high school. I was with my, you can say, high school sweetheart at that time. I was with her for a very long time, for 9 years. And then when that ended, that's when I took a look at relationships very seriously. And I said, okay, what makes this a relationship work? What doesn't make it work? How are men supposed to be? How are women supposed to be? And I did a lot of research. That's typically what I tend to do, is I just do a deep dive and get to know the subject and the topic and become a subject matter expert. And that's when I first started. So that was back in about 2004 when I started taking a look at relationships. And it was interesting because I had reached out to some of the top relationship, you can say, psychologists in the US at that time. And they were saying there's a shift in trends in terms of what's happening between men and women. And you can say, not feminism per se, but the movement of feminism and patriarchy and this whole concept of relationships. And even relationships going into, or people having 3 relationships throughout their life, and that being the norm, for example. So dating someone before you get married, so kind of like the fun stage, someone that you'll raise kids with, so you'll go through that, and then someone you want to have fun with after the kids are gone. And that is becoming very much the norm now that we see. And so I started taking a look at this a long time ago. But interestingly enough, even knowing that information, I didn't practice all of it because I got so caught up in our relationship sometimes and the not so good things. And so I would forget, or I would double guess or second guess myself. And then there was a moment for me personally where I said, I was kind of done with it. I was done with the back and forth and I just basically said, this is how I'm going to be as a man. And I just said, this is the energy that I'm going to be in, regardless of whether, and I remember saying this to her, and I don't know if she does, but I said, doesn't matter what happens in a relationship. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But this is me and my energy. From that perspective, I can tell you our relationship actually got better because I think it gave her, and correct me if I'm wrong, gave her the confidence to say, okay, he's actually stepping up as a man, right? And he's not going to diddle daddly around. This is his energy, and I think that gave her the confidence to step back into her feminine.
Yeah. Do you agree, Ruby?
Yeah, I think because I guess that as women, I think it's not so conscious. I guess all this happens at more of a subconscious level where you're attracted to a certain type of energy. And you don't really think about, like, I never really thought about this stuff before until I was married to Purdeep. But yeah, I think having that masculine energy takes, I guess, a bit of the, I don't know, like the responsibility and the need to be masculine myself. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I think you could probably articulate it better. But like these days, like you're saying, women are because you have a career, you have family, you have kids, you have like a lot of different things women deal with all probably at the same time. Like we're not as task oriented as men are, I think. So it's easy to kind of shift into that masculine energy ourselves because we're just trying to get through the tasks and make sure kids are okay, make sure your career is okay, make sure you're getting stuff done. And then like I felt like I didn't really have time to be feminine, or you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't like, oh, let me
That
go,
is what happens.
let me go be feminine now and like slip into something sexy and just chill out. You know what I mean? Like, it was more like, okay, no, I got to do this. I got to do this. And I think maybe that's what kind of threw our relationship off too. Cause I was so focused on my career that I wasn't really focused on it much else except the kids when we had kids. But I think that shifted the polarity, as you want to say, in our relationship significantly. And I think learning more about this and understanding it more has helped. And him being more in his masculine and allows me the freedom to be a little bit more feminine. And like I work on it now more because I'm more aware.
You feel more free in that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, everything that you research Purdeep, is it like afterwards, like Ruby has to go and learn about that also and becomes the whole?
In an ideal world, yes. Does it always happen? No. But there are key times where I do say, okay, this is important for a relationship. You might want to take a look at this. And I understand because she's got, for example, she takes care of the health stuff, right? So I've said to her, you're the expert. Like, you know, medicine, you know, diet, you know, all the other that kind of stuff. I'll leave that to you. And I'll kind of take on the lead in other aspects of our life. But there are times where I do say, yeah, can you read this, please? Because I just need you to understand this from my perspective.
Yeah, strategically sends me articles. Like, oh, for your interest, you might want to read this. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, like later I'll ask you, did you read it?
But I think that's a really good point, because I think it can become a little bit dangerous too, because, I don't need her to be an expert. I just need her to understand certain parts of my perspective. And I think that's ultimately it. And sometimes it happens so that even if I say something, it doesn't always register. So I kind of have to have it given to her from a third party, because then it's not
you saying it, it's someone else saying it.
Exactly.
It's funny. We can say this jokingly, but you know how many times she brought articles, she sends me articles and I read it and I just sit there with a blank look on my face and I say, how many times have I talked to you about this? But it's almost comical. So something like that would have pissed me off before, but now it's comical and I can actually laugh at it now. And it's just
you could be glad that she now finally understands it.
I think it's the indifferences that really I have to appreciate, because if you get caught up in all the differences, it just ruins your relationship and it ruins you as a person. And so just appreciating those things becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes life more adventurous. And just now, how do your kids see your relationship? From what do you think they are learning from you? I know they're really young still, but they're obviously observing and taking everything in.
I think from our daughter's perspective, she is very much into us, like kissing and hugging. And she wants, we'll sit there on the couch and she'll take my wife's hand and she'll take my hand and she'll put it together. And so you could tell she's very aware from that perspective. So I could see her seeing that kind of love story that, she asked you too, do you love Dada? Are you in love with Dada? So she does see
She's
that.
into princesses and fairy tales.
Reassurance that you guys are in love.
Yes. I think from my son's perspective, it's a little bit different because, again, I'm completely transparent. My wife may hate me for talking about this kind of stuff, but my son went through, I guess, a different phase of our relationship because he's the older one and we went through some tough times at the beginning. So I think he sees it a little differently because he was around. He was a little bit more aware of our challenges. And I think we're way more conscious now about what's happening in our relationship and not letting our kids know. But at the early stages, we would, I think your parents have to be very careful, because even when we go into the room and we say Mama and Dad are having an adult conversation, they know that something serious is up. And so they're always wondering. And there's been times where we've had some heated conversations and Ruby's shed a couple of tears, and when the kids will see that, they'll be like, Dada is just a jerk. Right. And so I have to be very careful from that perspective as well, in terms of what they see.
Yeah, but I think it's also really good for them in a way to see. Obviously, you have to be careful, right? Like you said, you don't need them seeing everything, but to know that you guys are having a conversation and then seeing that you're coming out of this better and you still love each other. And when they're older and they're more mature and they realize that these conversations are the good thing, there's no yelling and fighting, then they can really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so for our final question that I ask everyone, how do you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, connection, and intimacy?
Well, I can tell you, for me, it's wanting to spend time with the other person and wanting to spend time with that person for the rest of your life. That's how I see the relationship is I want to spend my days with Ruby when Ruby comes home. Like I'm looking forward to it. It completes for me, it completes my life. And so I think wanting to spend time for me is that's pretty much it, because I don't have a lot of time to spend with a lot of people based on my work, and the people I do want to spend my time with are people that I really want to, that I enjoy, that make me feel good about my life, and this relationship is basically it for me. You have to say something different. No, I was kidding.
Well, what do you say, Ruby?
I think can I use the word passion?
Sure.
So having passion, similar to what you said, like not just like intimacy wise, but having passion for creating a life together, passion for your children, passion for your work. I think that would just make it a lot more fun and make you feel more alive when you have that passion for everything and you're doing it together.
Yeah, I agree. I like the word passion. That's one of the things that I live by day in and day out is if there's no passion, there's no point. I don't see, for me, and again, I see a lot of guys, I can tell you 8 out of the 10 guys that I work with, they are not in relationships with passion. And that is their biggest challenge. And I think from a guy's perspective is we think that guys don't want the passion, or there's this conception that guys don't. They do just as much as women, and sometimes even more. They desire it, they crave it. So I'm glad you used that because that's important.
He approves.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was great, guys. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us. It's great talking to you.
Did you enjoy that episode? Could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.